Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean. My voice is very excited to talk about what we're going to talk about today because H3H3 recently got a strike because a lot of people said that he went too far. Now, I, who am not in favor of internet censorship, who would have not given Ethan Klein this strike, am going to break this down for you. I'm going to slice it up, talk about it, and I'm going to convince you in every way imaginable about how I'm right and how, based on what Ethan Klein advocated for, he not only deserves this and much, much more. But before we get into that, before we discuss this ridiculous situation, we have a sponsor. I'm going to toss it to the sponsor, and then we'll come back over here and discuss the whole thing on the other side. It has just been revealed that the average American is likely going to spend $177 more per month heating their home this winter. Now, this is due to obvious geopolitical reasons, but I don't know about you guys. I'm not really looking to go broke heating my apartment during the course of these geopolitical conflicts. This is one of the reasons why this video is brought to you by GetMiniHeater.com. You see, there's a fundamental flaw in your central heating system, and that is, for most of us, you have to heat your whole entire home or apartment at the time that you just want to be in one room and not freeze to death. Well, don't be a doofus. Don't do that. Get yourself a mini heater at GetMiniHeater.com and heat the room that you're actually in, so that way you can save on your overall heating bill. This thing pays for itself in a month, and for my audience out there, if you go to GetMiniHeater.com, 45% off, 60-day risk-free trial. See if it pays for itself in a month. GetMiniHeater.com. So recently on the H3 podcast, as many of you well know, because I'm always the last person to cover any of these stories because I don't care about being first, I care about being correct, Ethan Klein decided to throw out some disparaging remarks related to Ben Shapiro, because we all know that your evolution as the most basic progressive in the world is to start randomly taking shots at Ben Shapiro based on hypocrisy, which is based on your assumptions that are completely false about him. And before we get into the clip, before we get into what got Ethan Klein in trouble, I do want to give a bit of a background around this. So, for those of you who are unaware, Candace Owens works at the Daily Wire. Ben Shapiro and I believe Jeremy Boring are the owners of the Daily Wire. And Candace Owens also is somebody who is connected with Kanye West in some way, and Kanye West recently said some really questionable and very anti-Semitic things about the Jewish people, because that's who you're typically anti-Semitic about, not about other Semitic peoples, specifically the Jewish people. And if you know the distinction that I just made there, congratulations, you are smarter than 85% of the general population. Now, Candace Owens defended one of Kanye West's tweets, and honestly, this tweet at hand, the one where it said DeathCon instead of DEFCON, was actually not an anti-Semitic tweet. It was just Kanye not knowing how to spell. But the other things that came from Kanye West were definitely in that vein. Now, Ethan took exception to this, Ethan got angry, but Ethan decided that he was going to basically make the argument that Kanye West got this from Candace Owens, and therefore Ben Shapiro, through the transitive property, is responsible. He made up that Ben Shapiro didn't call out Kanye West, among many other things, and that led to this clip in question.
Bunch of he's got some people around him, I don't know who, maybe it's Candace Owens or others, that are, you know, repeating a lot of these age-old stereotypes and bigotry against Jewish people, and the dude's brain is applesauce, and so he can't even, like, he doesn't even know the conspiracies that he's talking about. Like, that proves it. What he just said made no sense, and it was like, it's like 20% of 3 different anti-Semitic conspiracy theories.
It's like
kind of
choose your own adventure of anti-Semitic conspiracies. Well, Candace Owens also works for the Daily Wire.
That's right.
He's apparently getting all this fun anti-Semitism from her, it seems like. He just love it. Ben Shapiro. Bring it, baby.
Orthodox Jew. One of the good ones.
Man. God, another up joke I wanted to say.
Easy, Tiger. No, Zach. Cut the timpani.
Oh,
Type it.
I was just going to say, if there's another Holocaust and people start rounding up the Jews. this. I just say, if they start rounding up the Jews again, I hope Ben gets gassed first. Or last.
Jesus.
Really not to...
But here's the thing. None of what Ethan Klein said is actually true. The chain of events is completely wrong. In fact, Kanye West doesn't have differing views on Jewish people from many black celebrities that are followers of Louis Farrakhan, that are in the rap industry, or similar. In fact, Nick Cannon expressed this whole black people are the real Hebrews or black people are the real Jews back in 2020, and it wasn't that big of a deal comparatively because Nick Cannon is overall politically on the left. In fact, Kanye West actually said quite clearly that he got these views from Ice Cube, and very famously, it even made Straight Outta Compton the movie. This is something that Ice Cube has had issues with in the past. Now, essentially what the comments are all about in all of those cases are the fact that Jewish people are disproportionately represented in the media, according to some people, and this somehow means that there's something nefarious going on. Now, we've talked about on this channel about 1,000,000 times about how disproportionate representation in career fields or in the criminal justice system, that disparity on its own doesn't mean anything. In fact, there are many reasons that many different cultures go into certain professions. Indian people are well known for going into doctoring. By the way, Jewish people also become doctors. Chinese people are really prominent in real estate around me. Even though that's a regional thing, it's distinct and you can notice it because there are other Asian communities that do well for themselves that have nowhere near the amount of clout in real estate. And by the way, in a lot of major metropolitan areas, there's a lot of Chinese money buying up real estate. Koreans tend to be shopkeep owners on average in a lot of black cities. Like, this is a very famous thing that we've discussed. And whenever you have an instance of some minority group that is doing well for themselves, and there's somehow a middleman between a majority or a regional majority and whatever the item is that they're looking for, this tends to breed hatred. We've talked about this in the context of Armenians with Turks and all these other things, and it all produces similar stereotypes. So what I'm saying is that while it is true that certain demographics tend to go into certain fields, and thus there are disproportionate outcomes or quote-unquote overrepresentation, which by the way is very overplayed considering that the media capitals in the United States of America are New York City and Los Angeles, and I believe New York City has the largest Jewish population outside of Israel in the world, and Los Angeles is right behind them, is the fact that disproportionality does not necessarily mean something nefarious. And you guys, I know some people out there are going to say, oh, you're running cover or whatever, but this is what we talk about over and over again, and the fact that Kanye adopted these beliefs is ridiculous, but even more ridiculous are the claims that these beliefs somehow come from Candace Owens. Candace Owens is not a proponent of this. Ethan had to go out of his way to ignore the proponents of this common theme among black celebrities of pushing this. People like Louis Farrakhan, people like Ice Cube, who, by the way, I believe has renounced his past claims related to this to give him credit where credit is due. And then he tried to shift that to Ben Shapiro because Ethan Klein fundamentally doesn't like Ben Shapiro. So when you take this all in its totality, what you end up figuring out is that this isn't about what Kanye West said. This isn't about anything other than the fact that Ben Shapiro is a conservative and Ethan Klein views him as his opponent, so he will use anything and everything to smear him. Now, the next thing that we got to talk about is the supposed joke in what Ethan Klein is saying.
One of the good ones.
Man. God, another up joke I wanted to say.
Easy, Tiger. No, Zach. Cut the timpani.
Oh,
Type it.
I prefer really
I was just going to say, if there's another Holocaust and people start rounding up the Jews. I just say, if they start rounding up the Jews again, I hope Ben gets gassed first. Or last.
Jesus.
Really not to...
Now look, Ethan Klein is not anti-Semitic. I know a lot of people are reporting this as an anti-Semitic joke or an anti-Semitic attack on Ben Shapiro, but it's just not the case. Ethan Klein is ethnically or culturally or whatever Jewish. He just happens to not be very religious. Ben Shapiro is a religious Jew, but this has nothing to do with the differences between religious Jews and non-religious Jews. This all boils down to the fact that Ethan Klein hates Ben Shapiro because he's conservative. However, there's something else that I want to point out, and that is the people who are saying that conservatives are being outraged over jokes, including Ethan Klein, need to actually be able to point to where the joke is. Because if you break this down and you ask Ethan Klein the following questions, you will discover that there's no joke present in here. Because if Ethan Klein was asked, do you think Ben Shapiro is enabling anti-Semitism? He would say yes. In fact, he has tweeted out in his meltdown about this, post his strike on YouTube, that Ben Shapiro is enabling anti-Semitism and he's just pointing it out. So that part is serious. Now, part two of this supposed joke is if you were to ask Ethan Klein, and I'm being honest, and even though it's going to sound ridiculous to you and me and anybody with any kind of sense, if Ben Shapiro were forwarding anti-Semitism and that could lead to a second Holocaust, Ethan Klein would say, yes, that is a possibility, and he does believe that's the case. This is something that he's doubled down on over and over again. This is something that left-wingers that are affiliated with him, like Cenk's nephew, have pushed in response to him getting the strikes. So right there, this component of the conversation is not a joke either. Right here, you have Ethan Klein saying on Twitter in his meltdown that he's identifying the anti-Semitism that Ben Shapiro is allowing to foster, and obviously he's doing this because he is under the warped view that A, Ben Shapiro is enabling anti-Semitism, and B, this anti-Semitism is going to lead to growing anti-Semitic laws or whatever. That's why he brings up the Christian nationalist portion of it in his other tweets. So this is a genuine belief, or it is at least presented as a genuine belief by Ethan Klein related to this issue. So then we come to the close, which is, okay, Ethan does say that Ben Shapiro is legitimately enabling anti-Semitism. That is not a joke. He does say that this will lead to a potential Holocaust, which, by the way, was a large talking point across the left, across the internet, related to Kanye West. It was all over the news media and all that. And remember, that is being attributed to Candace Owens, and then through the transitive property being attributed to Ben Shapiro. So then Ethan concludes by saying that if this second Holocaust comes, he wants Ben Shapiro to be killed first. So which part of this is the joke if Ethan is standing by each and every one of the beliefs? You see, what's actually happening here is Ethan Klein is calling for the death of Ben Shapiro based on the fact that he disagrees with him politically, something Ethan has a pattern of doing on his channel, on his podcast, across the internet, on Twitter, and he's doing so based on things that he claims, and if you asked him directly, are his legitimate beliefs. But then when people get upset, or people point out how ridiculous that is, or people contradict that, or they point out how nasty that is, Ethan is falling back on the joke, because fundamentally, Ethan Klein is a coward. Now look, even though Ethan Klein is not joking, in my opinion, there is no joke present, and I think that he genuinely wants, because he says this over and over again, harm or wishes ill will towards the people who disagree with him politically, and that's one of the nastiest things about him. I don't want him to get a strike and not be able to upload on YouTube for a week, and this is obviously due to my position that the platform should not be regulating speech in this manner, but more fundamentally, it's because it gives the illusion of fairness where there is no fairness. If Ben Shapiro would have said this about Ethan Klein, Ben Shapiro would have gotten a significantly stricter punishment than Ethan Klein. Ethan's suspension for a week, and then we're all like, oh wow, there's consequences for people on the left, is done as an example to trick us into thinking that there's less bias on these platforms than there actually are. In reality, in actuality, that is not the case. Ethan is just put himself up there as this person who's advocating for other people to get banned, but he also puts his foot in his mouth from time to time, so he gets a little slap on the wrist every time he does something bad, then he whines about it for days, showing that he's the biggest baby about this, by the way. And then this becomes a thing where, oh, the right wing does cancel culture too. The right wing does this. The right wing does that. Even though Ethan Klein's career is not going to be negatively impacted by this, he's going to do a rally stream in a week to say, hey, look, I'm back. Oh, they couldn't cancel me and all that. And nothing substantially is going to harm him other than the fact that for a week, he won't be able to upload onto his platform. And honestly, the guy needs a break to go live his life. and all of that, because he's not getting as much enjoyment out of it as somebody in his position should. And it's not like he's learned a lesson from this. Look at his tweets on this issue. A few white supremacists successfully lobbied YouTube to suspend me, a Jewish dual citizen of Israel and the USA, for anti-Semitism. Ben Shapiro and friends can virtue signal all they want, but ultimately, they're the ones platforming dangerous anti-Semites. All I did was point it out. For anyone who knows anything about Ben Shapiro, the idea that you're going to claim that Ben Shapiro is soft on anti-Semitism is absolutely wild. It's absolutely crazy. On top of that, it should be obvious to everybody who understands the concept of linear time that Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire and Candace Owens specifically, who, by the way, Ben Shapiro isn't controlling the mind of, for those of you who are unaware, she's her own independent person, actually had Kanye on prior to his comments that got him in so much trouble. Prior to. So if you understand linear time, then you understand that this happened before, and then the thing happened after. And by the way, Ben Shapiro condemned this after. Candace Owens ran defense for one tweet. However, there are additional posts related to Instagram that are far more questionable that she didn't mention, so you can criticize her for that, but that's not on Ben Shapiro. On top of that, this guy hosts a show with Cenk's nephew. Cenk's nephew hates Israel, and whatever you want to say about the nation of Israel, whatever your objections, because I know there's anti-Israel people out there in my audience, to that country or whatever its policies are, the idea that you're going to say you hate Israel because of human rights violations, but you're not going to spend any time basically criticizing any of the other Middle Eastern countries with far worse human rights records is a little bit startling. It's a little bit noticeable. It's a little bit strange, but again, Ethan Klein has no problem working with Cenk's nephew, and he has no problem promoting the very anti-Semitic population in the Palestinian territories that exist, as Ben Shapiro pointed it out. Now, you could say, like the left says, that you have a right to hate your oppressors and all of that, but that is the ideology that is put forward in the Palestinian territories. I'm sure plenty of them just want to live peacefully and all of that. This is one of those not all situations, but when given the chance to elect their own representation, they chose Hamas. So to say that it's not a prominent view in this area of the world, it's not a prominent view among the same people that Ethan Klein is running cover for, is absurd. But again, we don't want to get harped too much on that because you guys are going to be like, oh, well, Israel did this or that. And honestly, I don't care. This is about the back and forth between Ethan and Ben Shapiro. Now, the next thing that Ethan says is Ben Shapiro, who is happy to perform a purity test on me and declared me a bad Jew for criticizing Israel. Now, I talked about exactly what he was saying about Israel before. Host Candace, Hitler just wanted to make Germany great again, Owens on his website, The Daily Wire. He is constantly excusing and enabling anti-Semitism. Now, if you were to bet money, take out your whole life savings, and you could put it on one side of this issue or another side of this issue. And the issue that we're talking about is whether or not Candace Owens defended Hitler by saying Hitler just wanted to make Germany great again. What side would you put your money on? Would you risk your life savings on that definitely did not happen, or would you risk your life savings on that definitely did happen? Obviously, the answer is this is a horrible misquote by Ethan Klein. He's actively lying about Candace Owens, but honestly, I don't even know if it's a lie. I think Ethan Klein just might be that dumb, and he's getting a dumbed down, incorrect version of what Candace Owens said from the media, from the left wing, from whoever, and that's what he's going off of, because all Ethan can do is just regurgitate, like a game of telephone, so it's always broken, points that other people make. Here's the clip of Candace Owens supposedly defending Hitler.
I agree. I actually don't have any problems at all with the word nationalism. I think that it gets, the definition gets poisoned by elitists that actually want globalism. Globalism is what I don't want. So when you think about, whenever we say nationalism, the first thing people think about, at least in America, is Hitler. You know, he was a National Socialist, but if Hitler just wanted to make Germany great and have things run well, okay, fine. The problem is that he had dreams outside of Germany. He wanted to globalize. He wanted everybody to be German, everybody to be speaking German, everybody to look a different way. That's not, to me, that's not nationalism. In thinking about how it could go bad down the line, I don't really have an issue with nationalism. I really don't. I think that it's okay. It's important to retain your country's identity and to make sure that what's happening here, which I think is incredibly worrisome in terms of the decrease in the birth rate that we're seeing in the UK, is what you kind of want to avoid. So I don't have I have no problems with nationalism. It's globalism that I try to avoid.
So when you hear that clip, what you actually find out, unsurprisingly, is that Ethan mischaracterized it. What Candace Owens was saying was that if Adolf Hitler just wanted to improve Germany, that wouldn't be a problem. But he targeted members of his own population and killed them, and he invaded other countries. So what Candace Owens is doing right there is trying to defend the idea of nationalism. And to be clear, nationalism isn't bad on its own just because Adolf Hitler was a nationalist. And by the way, I'm emphasizing that last point, that Adolf Hitler was a nationalist among many other things that he was, because Candace Owens is actually completely wrong about the idea that he wasn't. Part of the reason why the Germans were invading all these other countries was for living space. I forgot what the German word for it, but it was actually a policy of Nazi Germany to gather more territory so that the German people could have living space. So even though he went internationally, he did this to expand the power and the reach, according to his ideology, of the German people so that they could have living space because they were the master race. So Candace Owens is wrong there. You could criticize her there. You could point out what she's saying and how it's actually factually inaccurate about this point or that point in her defense of nationalism, but Ethan doesn't do any of that. Ethan says Candace Owens praised Hitler unironically, and then Ben Shapiro was like, I'm gonna hire her because we all know Ben Shapiro is soft on anti-Semitism of all people. The joke is that I was suspended for simply points out that Ben, who is desperate to be accepted by his Christian nationalist friends as white, will only ever be seen by them as a useful idiot, and sadly for him, a Jew. Ethan Klein is now making the claim that Ben Shapiro wants to be accepted by his Christian nationalist friends as white. Well, if Ben Shapiro wanted to be accepted by his Christian nationalist friends as white, one of the things that he could do is, convert to Christianity, not wear the yarmulke, and change his last name. He hasn't done any of that. In fact, he has entire segments on his show where he reads the Torah. I believe he used to do it every Wednesday because he's very much into his Jewish heritage. He's very much into being an Orthodox religious Jew. He is not trying to be accepted as white and or Christian because if he was, I don't know if you know this, Ethan, Ben Shapiro could just convert to Christianity. He's not interested in doing so. He's a religious Jewish person, and the idea that you would try to play down the fact that Ben Shapiro is all in on Judaism is totally wild, especially considering that you don't keep to the traditions, you just call yourself Jewish as a blanket of protection due to the fact that you have cultural and or ethnic ties to it. It's absurd. It's insane. What are you doing, Ethan? Why are you lying about him? And by the way, even if you were to say, oh, look at all these Christian nationalists, quote unquote, at the Daily Wire, those people work for Ben Shapiro, so they've been criticized by the same people that Ethan's talking about, the tiki torch carrying types, for being subordinate to a Jewish person. That was something that Matt Walsh legitimately had to deal with. I remember a few years back, or maybe a year or two back, was criticism of him working for Ben Shapiro. So no, this is just not the case. They've defended Shapiro, they've defended his Judaism, there's no reason to question his Judaism unless you're Ethan Klein, and you're a scumbag, and you're trying to back out of the standards that you wanted forced on everybody else when they're mildly enforced against you. Now, Ethan goes on to talk about how he's fighting yet another fair use lawsuit, or a defamation case, or whatever, and in those specific instances, yes, I'm in support of his efforts to defend the First Amendment, but again, Ethan only likes to defend these principles when they're convenient for him. He'll throw anybody and everybody under the bus when it's their situation because he's become a part of the cancel mob. However, Ethan decided to tie this all up with one of the most cowardly, weak moves that you could possibly make. And by the way, if you follow me on Twitter over at IamSean90, you know exactly what I'm referencing. And that, of course, is this tweet. And for those of you blind viewers who are watching the audio stream with your eyeballs on Apple or Spotify's podcasting platform, this is an image of Ethan Klein who shaved the middle of his head and then has like weird bad hair growing left and right, and it has this caption: Ben Shapiro, intellectual titan, arguing with this guy, by the way. And if you can't figure out what is so cowardly about this, I'm going to explain it to you in very simple terms. And by the way, this is something that Ben Shapiro has called out in relation to Jon Stewart before, and all these other alleged comedians when they get pushback on their genuine political beliefs. And this is as follows. If you state your genuine political positions, you put them out there in the public, then people react to them in a way and they challenge them and they dispute, destroy those positions, and then you retreat to, I'm just a clown, I'm not a serious person, I'm an entertainer. What you actually are is a coward. This is a cowardly move. Ethan Klein got himself into a thing with Ben Shapiro. He's making up a bunch of random things about Candace Owens praising Hitler and all that insanity. He's getting pushback. He's getting destroyed based on it. And then he retreats to, look at me, I'm just a dumb idiot. You can't trust me. All of a sudden, I'm a comedian again. So again, Ethan, you weren't joking. You were making a legitimate point. If you were asked point by point about your alleged joke, you would stand by each and every point in the premise, and you got called out on it. You got embarrassed. You got humiliated. You had a meltdown on Twitter. You posted more untrue stuff just to show how ill-informed and idiotic you are, and then you decided to say, well, everybody who's against me is a tiki torch carrying white supremacist. Again, referencing Charlottesville from like 2017, because that's what is on Ethan's mind. That's a number one issue, just so you know how relevant Ethan's political thoughts actually are. Ethan, you put out your positions. You put your name on them. You attached them. It was genuine. It was serious. People looked at those positions, they assessed them, they realized how stupid they were, and you hiding behind the fact that you sometimes call yourself an entertainer is not going to be a defense. Now, a lot of people like to give Steven Crowder a lot of crap, saying that he hides behind the title of comedian in order to make political commentary, but in reality, if you actually watch Steven Crowder, if you followed anything that he's done, he'll state his genuine political positions, he will argue them as a political pundit, and he'll tell jokes on the side. What people like to do to Crowder is they like to take his jokes, make that the bulk of what he was saying in order to cancel him by turning those jokes into something serious. This is exactly what Carlos Maza did. He cut together from about 20 videos of Steven Crowder debunking his Vox segments, 2.5 minutes of jokes, made it seem like that was the bulk of what Crowder put forward, and that he was serious about it, and that was used in order to get his monetization yanked. But in reality, if Maza would have tried to challenge any of Crowder's positions against his Vox positions, Crowder would have defended them. He wouldn't have, quote-unquote, hidden behind the idea that he's a comedian, but that's exactly what Ethan Klein is doing right here. Ethan stated his genuine positions. I'll repeat it 1,000,000 times in this video. You think I care? Because you'll watch it, because I told you to. And then he got pushback, and then he's like, look at how stupid I am. You're dumb for debating with me when I was being serious. Please don't realize how insecure I am. On top of that, there's even one more plot twist relevant to this story, because apparently, and I got this from Jeremy from the Quartering, because he has an army of nerds that watch absolutely everything on the internet at all times, this might not have been the reason that Ethan Klein got a community guideline strike. Because wouldn't you know it, in the same exact episode where Ethan Klein made this non-joke statement about Ben Shapiro, which by the way shouldn't have gotten him a strike, Ethan actually called for his audience, people in there, to send packages of human waste. Yes, I'm keeping it classy, like I have to follow FCC guidelines, to that redheaded streamer Armorith or whatever, that girl that has that whole thing where her husband may or may not have been abusing her, even though it looks like he probably was, to his home address. So Ethan Klein, in the same episode that this happened, and he could have gotten the strike for those comments, was actually soliciting action from his audience against somebody else completely unrelated to Ben Shapiro, which would have been sufficient grounds, and honestly more sufficient grounds for a community guideline strike than what he said about Ben Shapiro. So for all we know, this entire thing is a hoax by Ethan in order to smear conservatives based on the fact that he said something else ridiculous, and I gotta give credit to Jeremy from the Quartering for actually bringing this up in a video.
Doing it, or encourage anyone to do it. But that'd be, if you just received a package and there was poop in it, that's just kind of...
Trust me, public, he's going to be getting more shit than one man can handle.
Not for me.
Yeah, let's contribute.
No. Not for me. What the hell are you talking about? And I don't want anyone to ship him a box of their homemade feces, right, Dan?
Should stop talking
Homemade.
about this. This is not a good track we're going down.
Oh, Dan's pissed. Okay. People are saying it's illegal. Yeah,
it's obviously illegal. And
no, don't do it. What am I doing?
We've already almost doxed the wrong person and sent a hate mob of them. So not very sharp people in the audience that might take your comedic suggestion as a real suggestion and do it.
But I mean, it's just not what I would do. Can you send it's legal in the mail then?
Don't send him anything.
No, I'm not talking
Just
about
stop talking about harassing this guy.
What are you talking about? I'm not harassing anybody. I'm just hypothetically wondering.
He just can't, like, I mean, this whole section here would be like the second part.
You all ready for a week off?
Talking about getting a strike.
What? You think I'll get banned for that?
Yes, absolutely. Encouraging your fans to harass somebody in real life.
You're the one that keeps saying I'm encouraging.
Oh, and by the way, since this was all taken down from YouTube, I'm stealing the clips from Jeremy's video, and I'm not even going to give him credit for it. I'm just going to unedit this part out of the video so you guys don't see me give him credit for where the source clips were, and don't even check the sources tab in the description box of this video for that information. Now, that's all I really have for you guys today. I would love to know what you guys think down in the comments below, because just like Philip DeFranco, I always say 100% of the time, it's not a show, it's a conversation. It's definitely a back and forth. It's definitely not a I talk, you listen situation. It's a conversation, which is totally not something I say for YouTube engagement, just like Philip DeFranco does. If you like this video, then show it by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social media. Support me via the support links in the description box of this video. Feel free to leave a comment too. I'm only joking about how, calls to action work. This has been me talking about Ethan Klein getting a community guideline strike. Till next time.